There's something that you're not saying.
Hey folks, welcome to Free Press Sports with Carlos and Shawn. Carlos, it's finally happening, man.
Oh yes, we've been waiting. What, 3 months? 4 months?
4
How long
months.
has it been?
These guys, and I'm not going to cuss because I don't want to get in trouble with Anjanette. And there we go. We've mentioned her. We've gotten that out of the way. But these dudes have been. What have they been doing, Carlos? They've been blowing us off.
They've been in the transfer portal. They've been waiting for that NIL money. I mean, it's taken so much effort to get enough. I don't know what incentive for these guys to finally join us.
Well, we also want to prove to everybody out there there's no blue wall at the Detroit Free Press. We've got two guys that both cover Michigan State right here at the same time. What more do you want?
We're going to have them on for 3 minutes, and then we're going to talk about Harbaugh and coaches and quarterbacks for the next 57. So there is no blue wall. You're right.
There's not. All right, let's get to Chris Solari, because if we mention Graham and then Chris get feelings hurt, right? So we got to make sure we say Chris Solari and Graham Couch. Graham Couch, the great columnist at the Lansing State Journal. Of course, he works for our umbrella company, Gannett. And then Chris Solari covers us, doesn't cover us, or maybe he does, but covers the Michigan State Spartans for the Detroit Free Press and does a great job at that. Welcome, dudes. It's about time. Somebody
I prefer you introduce us as international travelers, Graham Couch and Chris Solari. That would be a good way to start.
Okay, how about we start with this? Graham, tell us why Chris is always so angry and why he's always so wrong.
I've never seen Chris angry, and I've never heard him wrong. So I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, there you go, Chris.
On the contrary, Graham is he gets at a 50% clip at least, right? Maybe a little more, maybe 53% clip.
Okay, all right. Let's talk.
And he's placid.
Yeah, he is, but he can shoot from half
court.
Unflappable. And hopefully before we go, Graham will tell Carlos his story about how you find your street cred at a pickup game.
Oh, yeah,
what you do. I don't think Carlos has never heard that. Pickup basketball game, of course. Carlos has never heard that. But, all right, guys. Carlos has got lots of questions. Let me just start with a quick one. What do you both expect from this football season that's about to start Friday night against Western Michigan?
I think it's a team with a pretty high floor, but I don't think we have any sense of what their ceiling is yet. And I think the things that are important to this season in terms of the long-term growth of the program and sort of their trajectory are different maybe than getting back to 11 wins and things like that. Like that, seeing, some progress defensively in certain areas where they were a sieve last year, or seeing the offensive line be able to cycle through quite a bit of turnover and yet still get some push and be productive, and a sign that that's going in the right direction. I think if those sort of things happen and they're 8-4, 9-3, that's a success for the year. And obviously how they do against Michigan will frame the season. But and ultimately I also think the Ohio State game early and making, if they look like they belong on the field with them, that'll change the dynamic of things a little bit. If they don't, that'll be a long last 6-7 weeks. But no, I expect a team that's fairly entertaining to watch. They've got a lot of playmakers, a lot of veterans at key spots, a lot of guys with something to prove still. And I think they should be interesting at the very least.
Yeah, and I kind of agree with Graham. I mean, outside and external, I guess expectations and satisfaction might be down, but internal might be up if they, like, let's say they won 10 games in the regular season last year before the bowl game. They win 9 this year. Is that a step back? Maybe. It will be for fans. But from what just exactly what Graham said, I mean, the defense has needed to be better. And when you say 130th ranked pass defense last, I believe Mel Tucker called it dead ass last in the country. There's only one way to go from there at that point, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's improving to his liking unless it shows market improvement in terms of, doing the things that it needs to do. And, that's the thing is, like, if you can do that and show the improvement, and play the style of football that they want, I think this could be a very successful season. And maybe they even surpass those expectations that outside people have and take that next step and dare I say, compete for a national championship.
I want to, the stuff that, by the way, make sure you guys check out their great coverage of Michigan State, Graham on the Lansing State Journal website and Chris on underneath Shawn's, columns and stuff at the Free Press. But you guys had some interesting takes. And so tell me, Chris, I saw your prediction 9-3. You have them losing to Ohio State and Michigan. Probably got you a lot of fans. I'm sure excited about that. But what is the best hope? Obviously, the defense has to get better, right? They lose Kenneth Walker to the third, huge loss. But what I want to start with you, Chris, and then Graham. Just what gives you the best hope for maybe overcoming those expectations, having a chance to maybe beat Ohio State at home and winning at Michigan State or Michigan Stadium? Starting with Chris, just what do they need to do? Where do they need to take that extra little step forward to have a chance to win those games?
Well, I think the first step is Peyton Thorne needs to be as good, if not better, than he was a year ago, because he's now going to be the central guy. Him, Jaden Reed, Trey Mosley, Keon Coleman, Jeremy Bernard. The passing game is going to be prominent and prevalent. I think that you can make up a lot of what you lost with Kenneth Walker by doing more in the passing game to open the run game, as opposed to last year where the run game opened the pass game. So I think they were at a 55-45 run the pass clip last year. If you can flip that and get the production and then have the running backs with Jarek Broussard and Jalen Berger kind of come in and contribute both on the ground and in the pass game, which I think they can do better maybe than Walker did. I think that's their key to success. I mean, Jay Johnson's offense showed it can put some points up and it can move the ball. And if you're able to continue to do that and kind of lessen the stress on your defense a little bit, I think that's one way to make that leap from a 10-win regular season a year ago to taking those next steps to try and be that. And whether or not it happens, remains to be seen, because I think the middle part of the schedule is pretty tough. But I think this team's going to go as far as Peyton Thorne's arm can carry them.
Yeah, and I think one of the things, there was something Mel Tucker said at some point in his first 2 years about what it takes to sort of compete at the national title level. And he's been part of those programs, right, at Alabama and Georgia that were doing that. And he said you got to have 3 or 4 real playmakers on both sides of the ball. And, in basketball, we would say 3 or 4 dudes, guys who are just, and so the question is, do they have that? And I don't think we know yet. Like, what is Jaden Reed? I mean, he's obviously going to be a guy who gets a shot at the NFL level, but is he a guy that's a real problem for defenses? And can he take that step? Like, he's a guy who's unbelievable going and getting the ball in traffic, and he's, but for a guy with his speed, doesn't always get the separation. And I think that's part of the reason he's back. Is Peyton Thorne going to become a guy who can just, carry a team on a drive when they need it? Is there somebody in that backfield? Is there one of these tight ends who's there? Defensively, do they have those guys? I think the interior of the D line is going to be pretty good. The transfer Amir Speed, is he that guy? Are they better at safety? Is there one of the line? Like, do they have guys that are problems, or are they just really solid throughout? And I do think their depth is better, so they're probably more likely to survive November and survive the whole season, where last year you saw that tail off. But I think that, to me, is the question. Like, what is, we saw it with Kenneth Walker. That was a guy who was a problem for everybody. And do they have those sort of guys on either side of the ball?
I know it's early. This is for, again, both of y'all. Unless, Graham, you just want to talk and Chris can stay quietly in the corner, that would be fine too. But I think I'm just having some fun, Chris. It's nice.
This is our podcast. It feels familiar.
It's nice to, yeah, right. It's nice to have you here. No, I know it's early and a lot can change. And Graham and I have these weekly conversations during the season often about this particular thing. But as far as Michigan State, what do y'all see this year? Do you think there's any kind of psychological thing going on at this point with I know it's just a couple of seasons, but with Tucker and in the Michigan program and the way he is kind of, D'Antonio obviously did too, but the way Tucker has taken this even to another level about how much they want to beat Michigan. And I didn't think that was possible after what D'Antonio did, but I'm just curious what y'all's thoughts are on that aspect of it. And then, what you see going down to Ann Arbor in a couple of months, because that's all that really matters is that game, right?
So I'll jump in here just to say this. I think the thing that's so different about this year for Michigan State is that it is not all that matters, and that there's this Ohio State game that's early. And last year that game was late. And so everything was sort of this crescendo to the Michigan game. And this year is much more similar to 2019, where they went down to Columbus, competed for a quarter and a half. Things fell apart. And the next week they got just hammered by Wisconsin, where they didn't show. And so I think sort of the whole keep chopping deal and all that stuff is going to be tested early. Like, if things go poorly against Ohio State, how does the rest of the season go? Now they got some time to recover before the Michigan game. And I do think that, I think there's less pressure on, once you've won two, I think there's less pressure on MSU. Like, fans, I think MSU fans, they will hate losing to Michigan and they won't handle it well. But in the long run, they will be able to, because they've won 10 of 14 and because Tucker's already won 2 and it's a road game, even though they've done well, they'll be able to handle it, because it won't be any sort of lasting prognostication or statement about the situation in the rivalry. Whereas some years is felt like that. I don't know if that makes sense, Chris.
Yeah, but I think Tucker's so motivated and driven that this is a benchmark game for him individually and personally that he kind of expresses. I think D'Antonio did a great job of that. But, I mean, you think about it. I mean, Tucker's the first to win his first 2 against Michigan. No one's done 3 in a row, obviously. And I think D'Antonio is the only one who won his first 2 at Michigan Stadium. So that's another milestone and benchmark. So, I mean, I fully anticipate this being a similar game to a year ago, where it you kind of go into this and it's like a lot of those rivalry games for a number of the years in like the 90s and 2000s. There were pockets in that era where it got out of control on the other side for Michigan, but I feel like this is kind of swung back the other way, where it's always going to be a competitive game. It's always going to be kind of a coin flip game. The emotion and the fire with which the teams are going to come in. And I think on the Michigan side too, I think it's an important point of emphasis that, hey, that prevented us from, running the table last year, in the Big Ten. So, I think this is going to be another competitive game that comes into that fourth quarter, because, man, what a game that was last year. That was one of the best environments that I can remember in college football in this state, from start to finish. The beginning of that morning till the end of the game, it was wild, and the teams want that, and I think the fans deserve that.
But I think pound for pound last year, people would think that Michigan was probably the better team, and that Michigan State found a way to win it and had Kenneth Walker. And so that's sort of the question this year. Like, Michigan lost 2 NFL pass rushers, difference makers who were a problem for MSU. Michigan State loses its, its running back that scored 5 touchdowns in the game. Like, so what, pound for pound, who's the better roster? And I don't know that. I think up front in the offensive line, you'd guess Michigan right now. But to Chris's point, like, at a certain point, it's ingrained. Like Michigan State, I don't see this team particularly. They could have a down year at some point, but a team like this is not going to go get blown out in Ann Arbor. So yeah, I think even if one side winds up with a slight pound for pound edge, it's going to be close.
What does this do? Starting with Chris, what does this do though for the psyche of the program? Right. I mean, we're not, to Graham's point, there aren't probably right now 4 difference makers on both sides of the ball, but moving forward, taking a step, I think, Chris, you have them right 9-3, getting into the Music City Bowl. But what does this do beating Michigan? And that's a tough stretch, by the way, right? Ohio State, Wisconsin, Michigan, right in the middle. But what does this do? Just that psyche for the program of, we own your asses, 3 straight, taking it to you at your house. And by the way, we don't know who the quarterback's going to be. It may be some guy we don't even might not even be on the roster right now. Harbaugh's taking his time making that decision. But what does this do for the Spartan Nation? How excited would they be to beat Michigan, shove it down their throats in their house?
Oh, it'd be huge. I mean, you mentioned that middle part. I think it's bookended with road games at Maryland and Illinois too. I mean, so that's the crux of the season. That that month of October for Michigan State. So, I mean, you're obviously going to know the Ohio State result at that point. So that's either a continued success that amplifies things even more, or it's one of those situations where that all of a sudden now becomes your primary mission if you lose again to Ohio State to win in Ann Arbor and do that. So, I mean, and, you know, a win in Ann Arbor for Michigan State always turns things up and turns things in a different direction. That's kind of been, you know, since D'Antonio, you know, when I think they won his second year there in 2008 on the road, and then they won again in 2010 down in Michigan Stadium. And I mean, those that really set them up for success and energized the fan base because, you know, they had been so long at that point since they had won in Ann Arbor. I think it was like between 1990 and 2008, maybe. So yeah, that still resonates to people. You know, maybe younger people, it doesn't because they did it so much in recent years. But I think to the general crowd and fans who have followed Michigan State for a long while, that a win in Ann Arbor always takes things to a different level.
You know, I asked Izzo several years ago about flipping a rivalry, and this was in the D'Antonio era when they were having their success against Michigan.
Tom Izzo? You mean Tom Izzo?
Tom Izzo. Yeah.
Oh, this is turning into a basketball podcast. Don't start, Graham. Tread lightly.
It's a football question.
Sean's ready.
No, Graham knows what hoops are about. It's the soul of life. Come on.
Yeah, no. Football season goes till September 9th, then it's basketball season.
That's exactly right.
But no, and because he had been through this before and sort of flipped a rivalry on its head, you know, and there were certain dynamics in play that were similar. And he said it took a decade, it took 10 years in hoops. And I said, well, how long do you think it takes in football before there's sort of a mutual respect, even if it's not always acknowledged, but there's sort of an understanding from the Michigan side that this is an equal or a worthy opponent or whatever, worthy adversary. And he thought it'd be 15 years. Well, I mean, this is 15 years now since that 2008 win. This would be the 15th game. And so, and if it were to happen again, you know, I think not only would it be a big deal for Michigan State naturally, but I think the pressure down in Ann Arbor would be interesting because that game in Columbus might not go well for them this year. And so if you lose 3 straight to MSU and then get pounced by Ohio State and all you've got, you know, is this one win over Ohio State really. And I think I would be very curious to see how that plays in Ann Arbor.
Well,
I think about that 2012 game too in Ann Arbor when Michigan won on the last second field goal for a 12-10 win, and just the collective exhale that came over that stadium. That, oh, thank goodness! It was like thank goodness we won. I can't believe we almost lost again moment. I mean, you know, that's if that gets into that situation again and they lose, I mean, boy, I mean, a lot of tight breathing there.
That was a noticeable moment, though. That was like something you hadn't heard before. It was like Michigan being relieved for beating MSU, and I had never heard that reaction coming out of that stadium before.
Well, it was probably private. You remember the late great Gary Moeller, rest in peace, who I think passed earlier this year. Right? Actually, maybe even back in the spring. Once said, I don't know if it was a group of alumni or someplace, and he took a lot of flack for this, but he said the game you at least want to lose every year is Michigan State. You know, the game you want to win the most maybe is Ohio State as a Michigan fan and somebody inside the Michigan program. But that the pain of losing to Michigan State was greater than the joy of beating Ohio State. And I think he's right. And I think that's that relief you're talking about. Hey, before we let you go, though, because I know Chris has got to get out of here. He's got to go do something, Graham. Maybe you know.
He's doing calf raises.
Oh, he's doing calf to keep those calves in tip-top shape. No, that sounds great. Before we let you go, Graham, can you, and then Chris can comment on this. Graham, can you tell Carlos what the secret is if you just happen to get into a pickup game? What the secret is to establishing yourself psychologically?
Yeah, no, it's about like if you're a shooter, especially. I mean, you don't want to do this if you're not a shooter because it'll backfire in a hurry. But if your game is shooting and you're in a pickup game that maybe you don't look like you belong in, you take your first shot's got to be from 25 to 30 feet, because what happens then is even if you just hit the rim, the whole court looks at you and says shooter. And then they know, like, you're out there for a reason. You belong. But if you like airball a 16-footer because you're a little nervous or something, you're never going to see the ball again. It's got to be 25 to 30 feet, and you get the respect of the whole court.
Oh, I love it. I love it. What if you airball a 40-footer, though? What happens then? It's
still, like, you can, like, one of the things I tell people today when I'm on the court with them is I'm out here shooting from 30 feet, and I'm 42 years old. Like, clearly I can shoot. Give me the ball. Like, I wouldn't be here otherwise. Like, what are we doing here? Like, that. So you just sort of play to that a little bit.
Chris, any parting shots, thoughts before we let you go?
Yeah. My thought is that, if you're going to establish yourself in a pickup game, the first thing you need to do is not give up a breakaway lay up to Joe Rexroad and put him on his back with a hard foul. You send a message that way. I'm different than Graham. I come from a more defensive minded school where show someone
you're more of a
happen at my house.
You're more of a Pittsburgh guy. Is that it?
Yeah, it is. I think that's part of it.
Okay.
My coach, my high school coach was a Bob Knight disciple, so take it from there. And Graham, I don't think would have thrived in our flex offense.
That's funny. Well, listen, I know you guys got to run. It's great to finally get you on here. We will have you on again later in the season. We can talk about football and hopefully, Graham, my goodness, basketball, please.
Yeah. Once we get past mid-September,
Yeah, we're good to go. All right, everybody.
If you don't want the Blue Wall podcast, we've got ours at lsj.com, the Spartan Speak podcast. That's a little more green, depending on how green you are. Maybe you think it is still blue.
And by the way, Graham, real quickly, plug your own fabulous show.
Oh, Couch in the Rube. It's a 3 days a week podcast. Language warning, just to give people a heads up. We don't have anybody watching over us for that.
Yeah, you can say what you want. You can go there. I think you can get a good referral to some marijuana too, right?
It is a sponsor. There's no doubt. Yeah.
Okay, which would be good for Carlos.
By the way, Graham, since you're using puns on your last name, can you please bring back Couch on Fire for your column name?
That was. Yeah, I never thought they'd do that. It was a joke when I told the editors that at one point. I was like, what about Couch on Fire? My dad had come up with it, and I thought, and they loved it. And so, we just changed, operating systems, and that's the only thing that killed it. So we'll see.
Sneak it in again.
We'll do.
All right, everybody. That is the great Chris Solari and Graham Couch. Thanks, y'all, so much for joining us. We will we'll talk to you down the road here in the fall, I hope.
Sounds good.
Thanks, guys.
All right.
See you soon.
All right, great. We will be right back with more Free Press Sports with Carlos and Shawn.
Hello, I'm Phil Friend, the host and producer of Spartan Speak, a podcast collaboration between the Detroit Free Press and Lansing State Journal focusing on Michigan State sports. Each week, I'm joined by the OGs of the MSU podcasting game, Freak beat writer Chris Solari and LSJ sports columnist Graham Couch, as we discuss and dissect the latest sports news coming out of East Lansing. Not only is Spartan Speak one of, if not the longest-running MSU sports podcasts out there, you won't find a show with two people as clued into the Spartans as Chris and Graham, each of whom have spent a decade-plus covering MSU and bring years of institutional knowledge and insight to the podcast. And once in a while, they'll let me throw out a take as well. Along with discussing the latest news, we'll break down the Spartans' last game on the hardwood and the gridiron. What went right? What went wrong? Jet sweep. Again? For both Mel Tucker and Tom Izzo, get you ready for the next game, make predictions, and so much more. We can also guarantee at least one reference to Kyle Mizzou every podcast. So if you haven't already, download, subscribe, and listen to Spartan Speak on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or on your podcast app of choice.
Welcome back to Free Press Sports with Carlos and Shawn. Carlos, that was fun. We've been waiting a while to do that. And we can see, you can feel the energy, and it's good because you every week have to lift my energy up. You're the one with the energy and the quips and the witticisms and the smarts, frankly, the insight, the analysis. All of it.
Disagree.
You're the one with all of it. And
right again.
Yeah, and you're much more handsome to boot, and you're a much nicer guy. So I mean,
what are you bringing to the podcast?
Nothing.
Seriously.
Nothing.
Jesus.
It should be. Well, there's a reason your name is first. In any case, no, that was fun. All right, my man. Let's talk about this quarterback business in Michigan. What say you? What the heck is going on?
No, that's not what the heck. What the hell is going on? I'm sorry, Anjanette.
That's twice now.
I know. I'm going to get censured. what the HE double hockey sticks is going on in double A squared. What is I just don't get it. I mean, okay, do we want to go full conspiracy theory and the transfer portal, and he's trying to keep JJ McCarthy from transferring and saying, hey, I gave you a fair shot, buddy, you know, just it's a competition and whatever. Is he trying to slow play this so that he keeps McCarthy on the roster? I mean, I don't know. And he's telling the media, lecturing about, you guys don't like cliches, but when I tell you the truth, you know, then you don't believe it and you second guess and have all these theories and whatever. So what was your read? I'm sure you were in Ann Arbor, right? For his press conference. What was the read on? I saw the video of his press conference. I just don't get it. And obviously he had announced this on the Michigan podcast a few days before. But did you buy any of this stuff that he's selling about the competition's too close and this and that? And why can't you just be the adult in the room and make that decision as the head frickin' coach of the Michigan Wolverines? Just make a decision.
Well, that part I buy. That's the one part I do buy, is it's close, you know, because they're very different.
Well, you can say that so many programs can say that,
and maybe so close. And I also buy the idea. I actually think there's a look, I'm not going to, he denied the other day that there was any other kind of agenda. I don't buy that. That I do not buy. There's no way, maybe not for recruiting purposes. Some might argue, you could say, well, okay, he's going to play he's going to give JJ McCarthy a start in the second game. By the way, let's just lay that out. Cade McNamara gets the first start this Saturday against Colorado State. The following Saturday, JJ McCarthy, he's a sophomore, more mobile, bigger arm, that kind of thing, gets the start against Hawaii. So yeah, I don't know that it's unprecedented, but it's definitely it's definitely uncommon, right? It's not. Yeah. It's rare. So I don't think it's necessarily about recruiting, because some folks might say, well, you bring the 5-star in and he can't, in McCarthy, and he can't play, he can't get on the field, he can't beat out a guy like McNamara, and by a guy like McNamara, a guy that got to the college football playoff, right? By the way, and I know there was a lot of good stuff around. We talked about that with Michael
Team
Cohen.
Captain, voted on by his teammates.
Exactly. We talked about that with Michael Cohen recently, who was on our podcast, who covers Michigan for the Free Press and does a fantastic job. Yes. So I don't think Harbaugh Carlos is sitting there saying, all right, I got to show future recruits that you're not just going to languish on the bench. I do think the portal is an issue, for sure, right? And they look at McCarthy and they see the potential, and they're like, if he could just read defenses a little bit more and progress and not take as many chances, he's got a little bit of Favre in him, right? I mean, the turnover against Michigan State last year when they lost, we were just talking about that. That was huge. Not to pin that loss on him. I mean, as Graham said, Kenneth Walker had 5 touchdowns. But yeah, no, that's what I don't think he's being completely open about his reasoning. I do buy that they're neck and neck, and the staff is saying, all right, let's do something radical. Let's see how they handle the pressure of a game, each of them as starters, and go from there.
That's just not making a decision, though. I mean, that's just so weak of not being able to be coaches and making, turning this. I think Reiner Saban, our other fantastic talented Michigan. We have to say that about everybody that we work with, but our fantastic talented Michigan writer. He wrote a really funny column about how this is a reality series. It's basically going to turn into a farce, and you can't. It's not apples and oranges. Colorado State and Hawaii are not the same team. They're going to have different challenges and different situations. Everything's different about the games, how the defense plays, everything, right? Now you can, it's a better evaluation than these practices.
It's much better.
But still, it's just not,
How is it a farce? No, there's no right or wrong here, by the way. Sorry, man. How is this a farce? And I don't completely.
The coaches need to make this
Reiner,
decision.
that was fine. That was clever, whatever. But yes, they are making a decision. You're saying that, and Reiner was saying that, because that's not what we're used to. That's like saying, oh my God, we thought the earth was flat for all this time, and it turns out it's round. So there are.
Is that a fact? Harbaugh would ask you, is that a fact?
Well, Kyrie Irving thinks it's still flat, right? You know what I mean? So, but I think that's crazy. I mean, I don't know. I'm not saying there's not other agendas at play here. We don't know that for sure, right? No matter what he says, but you do have to say it's a little bit bold. You know what I mean? It's like when he pulled Alex Smith for Colin Kaepernick when he was in San Francisco, who Alex Smith, a playoff quarterback, right? And he did, I'm trying to remember when he did it in the season, but
he did it midway through the season.
That happens.
He'd been hurt.
That doesn't happen that often either, right?
It doesn't happen that often. And and by the way, I looked that up. That was exactly 10 years ago, 2012. And he says, and people are asking, hey, they know that Kaepernick's going to start the next game. And Kaepernick had played great in, coming in for Smith, who I believe had a concussion. And he's like, no, this is, this is the opposite of someone asked, do you regret not being more forthright about that Kaepernick's going to start? And he said, this is no. And there's no controversy. This is the opposite of a quarterback controversy. It's the definition of a quarterback controversy, in fact. And what did he say on Monday? It's not a demotion for Cade. It's a promotion. I mean, there's like this constant Harbaugh spinny thing that like he lives in his own world. And a lot of coaches do. It's not just Harbaugh. But this whole, like, let me spin it this way that, it's a promote. Okay, if you're Cade, what do you think? You were just voted team captain, and now you're not going to start the second game. Like, you took this team to the college football playoff, and I understand McCarthy was hurt. I understand that there's legitimate concerns, and you need to keep your key players happy, but you need to make a decision. You're going to tell me that 2 games, 1 game from one guy, 1 game from the is going to give you all the clarity you need.
No, it's not. And he said
playing
that
also in both games. Like,
no, he said that.
Preseason?
No, he said it may go beyond 2 games. He also said he was open to that it may will be like last year, where they just share duties the whole season. I mean, that's a possibility too.
And what do you think? I mean, Braylon Edwards recently said, former Michigan star, now he's an analyst. He said if McCarthy doesn't have the job by the Iowa game, I think it's the 5th game, he's going to the transfer portal. Do you believe that? Do you think that's a real legitimate concern?
I mean,
somebody who knows the program.
I mean,
our man producer. Executive Poobah, he should be an executive producer. Andrew Hammond just gave the big thumbs up on that one, by the way.
That may well be true. And if that's the case, then that means that McNamara is just doing more things that contribute to winning football in those coaches' eyes. Right. And it's a chance they're gonna have to take. That would be a risk, right? Because McCarthy could go and because he's got a little bit of a higher ceiling. We saw that in the Georgia game. We talked about that with Michael recently, absolutely. Right? And that's the thing. We also saw what happened at Michigan State. So that works. It's tough. You go back to Brady and Henson. Not that Cade McNamara is Brady, but I remember those days, and I remember people were confused at what they were looking at because Henson had more mobility and a much bigger arm, not a much bigger arm, but he had a bigger arm, right? And he'd come in and he made great plays too, but it wasn't quite. And they moved the ball. They had a lot of talent on those teams. But Brady would come in and it would just go up and down the field, right? And people would kind of be confused, like, why? What is happening here? Why is this happening? Right?
And it's not only people, it's players. The team is confused. I mean, it's not just, it's in the building, and coaches don't share as that much with their players. Actually, it's a tight circle. It's only a select few coaches who are really in the know, who have Harbaugh I don't even know how Harbaugh is, how much he, shares the genius of his, someone said a galaxy mind, but it can be confusing to everybody. I just don't think this is not conducive to starting off the season right and continuing the momentum that you had from last season. I just don't like it. I think he's overthinking it. Let me ask you, Shawn, if
Georgia won a title doing this last year, right? They went back and forth with some quarterbacks. There are plenty of teams at the college level that do this and get away.
Yeah, Georgia had a lot of other things going for them.
But that's
too. It wasn't.
Well, I would argue. Ryan and I were talking about this the other day before the press conference, or maybe after the press conference on Monday at Shamrock Hall, that their defense should be better this year. It's funny because Graham referenced David Ajabo and Aiden Hutchinson that both left, but their defense will be overall much faster everywhere else, right? And they have a potential to be just as good or not better. I don't know if they will be, but offensively too, right? Their offensive line could be a little bit better. They got a lot of receivers. They're going to miss Hassan Hoskins. Who knows? But the point is, they could be really good this year. I don't know if they will.
Yeah.
I mean, really good. And if that in college, it's not like the pros. There are plenty of examples where this works. So I don't really think it's that crazy.
Yeah, I can't understand why. I mean, I just don't. If this was just two guys coming in at the same time in the program, it'd be a different story. But you have an established veteran team captain, and you're potentially stripping him of that job because another guy may go into the portal.
Well, it's not that he may go in the portal. It's because he may show enough in this amount of time that he can make more plays. I mean, so he destroys Hawaii. You and I might beat Hawaii. I mean, he destroys Hawaii. What does that really tell you about JJ McCarthy that you don't already know? Well, it tells you that you can make reads, right?
Does that mean he's going to beat Ohio State?
Not necessarily, but the idea of practice, and I know the talent level, they're actually probably going against, they're going against better players in practice in a way, but the pressure is not the same. It's just not.
Right.
There are 100,000 people, and it's a live opponent and all that. So I'm sure that's part of it. He wants to see what he can do with the pressure. And can he make reads? McCarthy has struggled with that. That's the thing.
Yeah.
McNamara is great at that. He's got to get better extending plays, which is what we saw him struggle against with Georgia.
By the way, this sets Harbaugh up for a problem, because after 2 games, depending on how he handles it, I mean, the hyenas are going to be out there and be like, well, what is it going to be? What's it going to be? What's it going to be? Like the second that second game ends, all the guessing is going to start, all the whatever, and all
by fans. You think they care about that? You think the players and coaches care about that?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of pressure. Yeah. You better believe that they care about that. How much time these guys have? All they do is look at what people talk about and write about and think about. And, no,
I understand that. But what they care about is, and to me, this is the biggest issue of all. He's got to figure out how that plays in the locker room and in the huddle, right? Because if one of those quarterbacks is beloved and trusted a lot more than the other, and he makes
McNamara.
Exactly. And he makes the opposite. And I wrote about that the other day, and he makes the opposite decision. There's a tight end, Joel Honigford, who talked about, we got to trust the coaches. And that's really the key to this, right? Because they're both talented quarterbacks. They can both do stuff, slightly different things, but they can both do stuff. But that's the key. That if he gets that wrong, his season's sunk.
That's and I wrote about that too. That this creates a problem with factions, in the locker room, and that some guys are going to be McCarthy guys, some guys are going to be McNamara. I would guess it's overwhelmingly more McNamara guys because he's been their guy. But there's still going to be some guys. And after these games, there might be some guys who say, hey, man, JJ played really well, and they just have a better connection with him. Some players, how there's just friendships that form and all that stuff and preferences. And, hey, man, I'm a receiver. I go deep. He can get me the deep ball better than Cade can, whatever it might be, right? All that kind of stuff. And then he's not picked. I don't know. In college, you don't have a lot of power as a player. You barely have any in the NFL. But it's a problem as opposed to the coach is just making a decision. Hey guys, I'm standing up. Boom. I'm not even going to make it a question. I'm making the decision. And by the way, he could have changed his mind. If Cade sucks and doesn't do what he needs to do, obviously JJ could still play. McCarthy could still play, but it's not a problem.
It's not a problem
it might be.
But right. It's not a problem until it's a problem. Everything could be a problem. That's the thing. By taking that view of life, you could say that about everything. My God.
You're just messing with something you shouldn't have to be.
What are you messing with? What are you messing
with? An established quarterback.
A team that got run at a different level, right? Now, it's not just the quarterback. They're changing the offensive line. They talked about the other day. They're trying to block now to the secondary. They're trying to pick it up. They could not pick up Georgia's stunts and blitzes and the twists and all that sort of stuff. They were overwhelmed by that. It wasn't just physical talent. So they're trying to do that too. So it's different parts of the team they're trying to figure out.
Sure.
Right?
This is just too important of a position to be monkeying with.
How are they monkeying with it? I mean, I just wait and see what happens. How are they monkeying with it? It may be disastrous. Absolutely.
Right.
What I thought was kind of interesting, I guess, was all the biblical references in the Solomon. I'm like, are you saying you're Solomon and that you're a king and that you're wise and that you're the wise one? I mean, yeah, to me, that's kind of, whatever. But in any case, all right, man, let's take one last quick break and come back with your favorite thing. We'll be right back with more Free Press Sports with columnist Shawn.
My name's Kerry Jr. II. I'm a podcast producer and reporter with the Detroit Free Press. and now the host of Freep's new weekly podcast, On the Line. Our job is to understand the issues and the people that the issues affect in our state and region and tell the news. I want Detroiters, I want Michiganders, I want Metro Detroiters to hear themselves and maybe get a sense of peace in this podcast. Maybe not in the topics we're covering, but in the sense that we're the Detroit Free Press. And you can come here to know what's happening and trust that we're going to tell the truth, give you the facts, and do it authentically. We're going to give you the voices that are in those areas, whether it be in Owasso, or whether it be in Petoskey, or whether it be in Birmingham, Warren, Grosse Pointe, Southwest Detroit. We're going to give you what it sounds like to be there. So every Friday in your feed, wherever you get your podcast, when you press play, we want this podcast to sound like home. We want it to sound like Michigan. We want it to sound like Detroit. I think that's all I got. So let the journey begin.
Welcome back to Free Press Sports with Carlos and Shawn. It's that time of the show, Carlos. My favorite thing. Go.
Wait. It's my favorite thing that you're going to steal. Okay. Yeah. You can't steal. Well, you are going to steal.
No, I'm not. Yeah. Go ahead.
All right. My favorite thing for this week's show is, so we dropped off our second kid in college. Both of them, twin daughters, are now in their little dorm rooms. And Shawn, I don't want to say that I don't know if I'm technically an empty nester now. I'm not sure, but we went out to dinner and didn't have to worry about what the kids were going to eat. It was kind of glorious. But as you know, as a dad of two wonderful children yourself, it feels empty. It feels the house is really quiet. It's not the same.
Nope.
I can't believe how much I've already, one daughter went on much earlier. The other one just went this weekend. So, but it's been progressively quieter. And now it's just me and my wife sitting there in the living room waiting for the second season of The Bear. So in a weird way, I'm really happy for my kids, but we're also very, very sad. We're going to miss them tremendously. And I wish all the other kids going back to school this week. A lot of colleges are starting, all the luck in the world, have a happy, safe year in college. And to the parents for letting their kids go and gonna kind of be in the same boat. I wish them also happiness and, full hearts and happy times to see their kids' success and see them grow.
Well, it's really nice, Carlos. I feel you. Last night, my youngest went back up to Michigan State, and it was blue all night long. And it's funny because he's been gone before, and you get used to having him back though. And you'll I don't know if either one of yours will come back for the summer, or they'll go do internships or whatever. But it's funny how that works. When they first come back, you're kind of used to them being gone, and then you gotta reintegrate and this space, and it feels different how they take up space when they come back, and you got to get used to that. But then you do, and you love having them back, and then they go again. And and that it's the same for me.
Is it the same though? Is it when they come back it takes a minute, but does it feel the same again, like they never left? Or
no, it doesn't. It doesn't feel quite the same, but they're still your child, so it's great having them there. But at the same time, the older they get, they just take space up differently, right? So that part's a little bit different. But no, I felt it last night for sure. I'll be quick with my favorite thing. We had a cabinet. I had a cabinet I had to replace in the kitchen. It was kind of worn out, so I used that as an opportunity to replace a 20-year-old, Formica counters. And in doing that, the folks that are helping me with this came over to pull the old counters, and put the new cabinet in, and pull the sink and stuff, and found some black mold on the drywall and some rot that we didn't know was there. Some electrical stuff that wasn't up to code. You know how this works, right? You get into their homes, and all of a sudden one thing leads to another,
rabbit hole.
Into the process of pulling out the drywall to replace that, they hit a pipe. I have old copper piping down there, and I'm up here writing a column about actually Harbaugh and the quarterbacks, and I can hear this, this water spraying all over the place down. And these guys are not plumbers. They can do some plumbing. They can do lots of they're finished carpenters and builders, They can do basic electrical, plumbing, but they can, they're incredible in a lot of ways. But they wanted to try to fix it because they did it. And I kept saying, this is like late in the afternoon or whatever. And I kept saying, I can call a plumber. I can call a plumber in the evening. I can call a 24-hour plumber. They did not want to give up. So finally, after trying to solder it back and it would leak a little bit and then having to cut the pipe off, use a little pipe and you take a couple inches off, you sand it and scrub it down and get it back in there and try to solder it again. They went through this 3 or 4 times. And this guy's a really good solder. He's good with the solder and welding. And we're down to the point where it's almost like when I don't know if you remember the movie where the airplane is on the island, they crash and they refashion this airplane. They're trying to get the engine start. They get down to one more starter or they're not going to be able to do it. Well, he's got one more little inch of pipe. And if this one doesn't work, we're going to have to pull the whole thing out. And this is like 10 o'clock at night. And the thunderstorms had come through and our power had surged for. And finally, that last time he got it right. And the look on their faces and the pride they felt. And this point, they'd been at my house almost 12 hours,
Oh my God.
Doing other stuff too. But just the dedication and the stick-to-itiveness, it was pretty awesome.
Was that a $5,000 bill or what?
No. I
12
told them 12
hours.
No. We pay them by the hour and they build all this beautiful stuff. They're amazing. But I said, I'm going to give you extra just for, even though it was their mistake, the plumbing back there was not, it was a loose connection. So I was sort of grateful they found it and got it repaired, got the mold. Without them, now hopefully we'll breathe better. But in any case, just the way they wanted to get that fixed and not let me call in a 24-hour, like a professional, because we lost water for the whole house. So you couldn't use the bathroom or anything like that. Yeah. So in any case, that kind of dedication, that was my favorite thing.
Stick-to-itiveness. I love it.
That's right. All right, my man. Good to be with you this week. We will see each other soon, I hope. Somewhere.
Yeah, one of these days.
One of these days. All right, my man. We want to thank Andrew Hammond, the producer who makes this possible, makes the Carlos show possible. We want to thank Anjanette Delgado, co-executive producer, along with Kirkland Crawford. Who else do we want to thank? Oh, Peter Bhatia, the editor of the newspaper. Is that?
Yeah, let's squeeze him in.
Let's
he doesn't listen. He doesn't. He has no idea.
No, he doesn't. He doesn't care. That's okay. No, he's like that. We also want to thank you for listening and putting up with us for another week. My goodness, Carlos.
It's time to end the show.
Yeah, it is time to end the show. All right. Until next week. Andrew's nodding at me. He's like saying, what about where you find the podcast? Yeah, find them at Apple, find them at Spotify. When you get there, rate it, subscribe.
If we didn't tell people how to find the podcast, they'd never find. Nobody would ever.
No, they wouldn't. They make
Spotify
us do. No, it's not that we think you're fools out there. They make us do this. This is part of the script. Andrew is not very. This is
total. This is how it is to work for an editor. Is make sure you tell them.
I know. And Andrew's he's not nice that way. I don't know. I thought he was raised right, but who knows? All right, my man. Let's end this show before we get in more trouble. We will talk to y'all next week.